For those of you that came to the earlier seminar with Paul, he stole most of my win. He gave you all the facts. I've got a whole different flip side of how French cars come about. I bought my car back in 9/11/2010, and I was standing in front of my refrigerator at home, staring aimlessly into it, and couldn't remember what I went there for. And I remembered I went there to get Oreos, so I go to the cupboard, get Oreos, and I go to the internet, up on eBay cars, up a 1964 ID. And I'd never seen one, didn't even know a thing about a Citroën, not one word. And the guy had about 5 pictures on there, and he had it pretty well hidden, some of the goods and the bads. But originally, when I bought my car, I bid on it. It sat there for about 3 days at $1,200, and I thought, you just can't find a car project for $1,200, even though it's out in Phoenix, Arizona, sitting in the middle of the desert. So I bid on it, and it went another 5 days, and I eventually was a proud owner and the only bidder of that car. So now I'm stuck with a 64 ID. So we made the shipping arrangements, and it was about $900 to get the car back over to Ohio. And it came on a transporter about 2 weeks later. And the car hauler pulls up, and there's one lone car sitting in the middle of this 12-car transporter. And this guy jumps out, and he starts throwing chains around, and he's grabbing this car, and he's just cussing and going crazy. And he says, "Is this your goddamn car?" And I said, "Yeah." He says, "Get it off of here." Because one tire had went flat, and it settled. It never was up on a suspension. They drug it up and they drug it back. So the muffler's laying in the bottom of the car hauler. So the whole exhaust system. The one side of the pan is kind of scuffed up just a little. And I helped him. We finally got it up off the car, jacked it up, put a few blocks here and there to get the suspension up enough to get it off the car hauler. And I actually gave him an extra $50 just because I thought he really did deserve it. But he was adamant that he would never get in his life pull another French car.
Yeah.
So it came all the way from Phoenix, Arizona. So when the car come off, standing on the car hauler, I looked at this thing and I thought, what the hell did you do? I mean, I didn't even realize it was a 4-door. I thought it was a 2-door. The guy had crap piled all around it, and I thought, now it's a 4-door. And the guys I run with are all hot rod guys. We've got really specially tricked out 32 Chevys and Buicks. Great paint jobs, which one of these came from there, and the interiors were done by another friend of mine that did this. So I'm sitting in the middle of this breakfast that we have every Thursday morning, and I told them, well, guys, my car is in. So everybody jumps in their car. There's about 12 of us. We go into my building, and they're setting my 64 ID almost on the ground. You couldn't have slid a pack of cigarettes under it. And they started walking around the car, and finally one guy just breaks out laughing. I mean, tears were running out of his eyes. So then the poking fun, and by the time we walked out there an hour later, we had already had this car tubbed out, cutting 16 inches out of the middle and making it a 2-door, putting a blown Hemi out the hood. And that was going to be, that's where that 64 ID was headed. I didn't know there was hydraulic suspension. The guy gave me a picture of the dash and the steering wheel and the front nose of the car, and I thought that was, and I got a nice little shot of the back corner where the taillights came on, and I thought, I like that car. So when I finally got it back at my house, and it took me a couple of weeks, I called a guy in Ohio. Some of you may know him or remember him by the name of Dennis Foley. And when I talked to Dennis, he lived in Mount Vernon, which is 90 so miles south of me, and we talked for a little bit. And I started asking him about my Citroën. And he was patient, and it got quiet for a minute. He said, Dave, it's a Citroën, not Citroën. So I said, okay, we're already getting started off here knowing what's going on. So right after I had talked to him, he made a transition, and he moved from Ohio to somewhere else. And I actually have lost touch with him, so someday maybe I'll get an address or an email, and I can at least let him know that the guy that talked to him 4 years prior did follow through on this project. But he gave me Brad Nosson, and that's when the project really started. So I started on the 64 for about 6 months and just took the fenders and the doors and got down to look and see what I really had rust-wise. And it was a pretty solid, the 64 was a pretty solid car. In the interim, the 66 that sits behind you came up on eBay in my own state of Ohio, less than 30 miles from my house. Again, it must have been a great selling price on Citroëns because it was $1,200. Oh my gosh. I was the only bidder on that car. But I did go pick it up on my own trailer and brought it back. And when I got it back, it was the Polaris version. And so between the two cars, I was able to segment enough of a car that I thought I could build a beater driver and just get it going. Well, then Brad Noss came into the picture and advised me that probably taking the Citromatic with a guy that didn't even know how to spell Citro and let alone work on one, it would be far better to work on a manual. So him and I started the process of getting the 66 going, and that took almost a year, before I finally had the motor was totally rebuilt in it. What needed rebuilt, the crank and the cam and everything were fine, but it needed rings and it needed a sleeve and it needed a lot of things, a lot of bearings and points. And we just slowly but slowly started to get it into a driver's condition. And in that time, I started looking for, well, what color do I want to paint the car? What color interior do I want? I didn't care so much about the cloth interior, or I liked the leather. So, I had a lot of decisions to make and how far I wanted to take my car. And about halfway through the project, maybe two and a half years into it, I'm on the internet again. Shame on me. And up pops the little model car, the Sur Balloon. And I said, holy crap, that's it. That's the car. So I think that model may have came from France, actually. And I had it shipped over. And we started then the paint shop matching paint colors the best we could off of a small model car. Roof and body panels themselves. And once I had decided on that color, then I had to decide on an interior. And we beat the interior to death too, because I knew I was stepping outside the box when I did what I did with blue leather and white leather mixed in a Polaris version, but to match the cloth interior and not necessarily the leather. But after a lot of decisions and a lot of bickering, I thought, my car, I know it's not going to be perfect. Let's take this car so people that don't know what a Citroën is, don't know anything about it. When I pop the hood open and open the door, people are maybe going to come to see my car. They're going to ask questions because they don't set well in a hot rod environment. But that's where this car will be seen. Car shows locally at my house. There's probably some other venues similar to this. So we started again, and it was just going to be a basic paint job and just a little bit of an interior. Well, it just keeps going and going. And as my wife can attest, I wouldn't even want to estimate. I wouldn't even guesstimate the amount of man hours involved in the car, because about 95% of everything you see on that car has my hands on it. From the body panels, which all four doors are cut from the seam down and all new panels welded in and filled and done right. Any of the rust that was found anywhere on that car was all cut out and replaced with new sheet metal. And this one here was the 66 was a little bit more rusty than the 64 was, but it was in the easy places to fix on the main side panels and in the floors, and the one jack point was gone, but that wasn't a big deal to fix either. Once you get your mind set, and if you have been fortunate enough to be able to do the work, it's fun. So I had my great days with it, and then I've had parts on and off of that car 10 times. I'd put the part on, and then I'd have to go back and take that part off to get another part off to get it on. and you back to the manual, and the manual's here, and you're in the car, and then I had the 64 still up in another building that I have, and the 66 here was at my house. So it's in my wife's face every night. And she's walking by and she sees the email to Brad Knopf every day, and the phone minutes on my phone bill coming. She would tell me, we've got 5 more days, honey, and you're 95% on your phone. So,
is that why I didn't hear from you for a few days?
That's it. Was it 90%?
I thought you were mad at me.
No,
90% on Monday.
I didn't hear from you for a while, but that was amazing. So the car continued to grow, and then as I got closer and closer to being done, then Brad can tell you again, we ordered up some more parts. The Marcel running lights came at the 11th hour. The car had already been painted before they had been on, and it took Brad to find everything that on the nose of that car. It took Brad probably 6 months with the people that he had available to put all the pieces parts together before we got that. And everybody came here, and they came maybe 4 weeks prior. So they had to go back to the paint shop and get those painted. So put them on, and then it's always fun to drill a freshly painted car. And you know, the French are the French. The template they send you is generic by nature, so if you're not smart enough to double check and you would drill the holes in your fender to match their template, shame on you, because they didn't match. You know, they must have been from some, because they were close, but they didn't match. So luckily I double checked all that before I drilled the hole. But I had the template on there, the holes were marked, ready to be drilled. And something inside of me said, remember all the things you messed up on this car in the last 4 years? Double or triple check yourself instead of doing it 3 and 4 times. So right now, you know, the car, it's right as I was able to make it. I think most of the mechanical parts on it and most of the stuff that is there is original, either new old stock or originally taken off of one of the 2 cars and put on. Probably the only thing that may not, the things that aren't original would be anything to have to do with the interior and anything that have to do with the paint. But it's my best effort of a color that was only available in 1959, and Carter actually, the Scully Blonde, I think was the name of the paint. And he was kind enough to show me on the internet, so I didn't necessarily pick a color that wasn't put on a Citroën DS car. Maybe only a few models had it, and but this mainly was done to represent, or be a representation of the Sir Balloon's car. That's my entire. That's where the car ended up being from about into this 2.5 years into the project. Sir Balloon's. Made every decision on that car that was to be done.
Carlisle event welcomes you to our 2015 season.
I wouldn't, you know, in my defense, I'm able to do well, and I know how to pick body parts, and I can block sand, and I can take a car, a bad car, and make it a nice car. And that's what this car actually is. This is the one that Paul advised not to go near. It's the kind of car that you shouldn't really mess around with unless you're in it for a specific reason. And for me, it was just about the hands-on to it, and just seeing just how much of this car really going to take to bring it home. Because it would have been destined to go to somebody for a parts car. I don't know that there would be anybody in the right mind that would have been maybe bold enough to take that car and take it for that at this point. But when you do it yourself, it's a lot more economical.
Polisher for a show car shine in less time.
And when it's fun and it's a hobby, it's even more fun. With the car, it's not about the car, it's not about me and the car. It's about people, about meeting you guys, it's about meeting everybody, it's about making new friends, especially with Brad Knopf, Dave, Carter, all the people that have been there for me every single time I needed help. Nobody ever molded, nobody ever said, how can you not know how can you not know how to take the car handle off the car? You know, what do you mean you don't know which way to put the windshield wiper? You know, I didn't know how to start that 64, and here I'm messing around with it one day, and I bumped the gear shift on the dash, and it started. I'd always been starting it with this little button that was up in the front of the car. And I bumped the gear shift lever, and I called Brad, and I said, guess what? He knew it, you know, but he never told me. Then when I did get the 64 running, and I started it up, and after we did some head work on the 64, and it's still sitting there in the same condition it was 4 years ago. That car went up, and it had, when I looked in the reservoir of the reservoir, it only had about half an inch of what looked like scum. And I thought, no way this car would rise. And we're sitting there and it's right on, and all of a sudden, it starts growling, making crazy sounds, and the back of the car goes up. The front didn't, but the back of the car goes up, and then just a few minutes later, it must have built up enough pressure that it blew a line off to the shifting lever, and the rest of the car fluid went everywhere. But it went up one time, and it had been sitting in this guy's garage for 20 years. 20 years, and that car started up. Plugs and screws and carburetor cleaner in it, and had a bent push rod, and it still ran with the bent push rod. It ran with a bent push rod and off of an auxiliary gas tank. Started up. At least I did then. It bit me, it had me, and there was no turning back. And I'm glad I did, because my grandkids, when the car was finally done, they got to see it, just a shell, a black shell in my garage, and then they'd see a little part go on, and then they'd see a motor go in it, and then they'd see this, and it grew slowly in front of them. We babysit both my grandchildren, at least one. Finally, when it was done, and it happened, the interior went in it, the paint and everything went on this car about the last one. So when they finally got to see it, they're standing on the back seat in their shoes on my brand spanking new leather interior, putting their fingers all over my windows that didn't have one single smudge in it. My grandson, who's 5 years old, looked at me and he says, "Hey, Pop, where's the push button for the window?" And so I had to show him how to roll the window down. He thought that was the coolest thing he'd ever seen. And from that, they said, we feel like we're in Hollywood. So they my two grandchildren fell in love with the car. It just glued it to me even more. So the reason it's here is because of Brad. The reason it's the way it is because of me, and it would have never happened if it wouldn't have been for her. It wouldn't have happened because of all everybody.
I have a few comments.
I'm not telling everything, so go ahead, Bill. Your minutes are up.
Now,
Your minutes are up. We are going to have a toast. There's wine back here.
Dave Agar is what I would call the guy with the most intestinal fortitude that I've met in a long time. He had never even seen a Citroën until he got these cars. He had never ridden in one, and he was here last year at Carlisle. He's been here at Carlisle for the last couple of years. And I said, Dave, you need to get somebody to take you for a ride in their DS so you see what you're doing. He said, nope. The first DS I ride in is going to be the one I'm finishing. And by God, it was sitting on a 5-gallon bucket, I think, when he drove it around the block after he had the engine in. There's not too many people who would undertake a project like this not knowing any more than he did to start with. It's very obvious that Dave is a very talented body man and a very talented mechanic to be able to end up with a product like that, but it just shows what can be done. And I just make a note, if anybody needs a rear height corrector changed on your DS, Dave is the man, because I think he had that one off at least 10 times before we got a good one. And I one more comment. He asked me a few days ago, he said, Brad, Do you think there's gonna be anybody at that car show that's any stranger than you and I? I have to tell you, Dave, I've been looking. I haven't seen it yet, buddy.
Oh, I don't know. There's some close ones, but not like you. That's for sure. I'm not going to mention any names either. I won't mention any names, Carter. Oh,
I'm sorry to interrupt your
no, you
presentation.
did not interrupt me. But again, have some. The wine's there. It's to
Toast the
toast
car.
to my car. So pour yourself a glass of wine if you prefer. There's still plenty of water here to drink.
Does anybody have any questions for Dave?
Yeah, ask away, because
Sale?
yeah,
right.
Not yet. Nah, you might buy it off of my kids. If you're at the right place at the right time, you'll get that car.
Yeah,
for nothing.
somewhere around here, Dave actually has one of the complete models. There's one setting on the dashboard.
There's one setting
but
in the
if you're not
back,
familiar with the Sur Balloons or Sur Balloons, is the car was actually an advertisement that Citroën did where the car was riding on 4 red balloons. So it was like riding on air. And then Carter did some research and found out that Citroën actually sold a handful of cars in that color scheme in 1969 in honor of that advertisement. Is that correct?
I don't know.
I thought you did.
59.
and 60.
Okay, but they did sell some, right?
Yep.
We're toasting to the car.
Thank you.
So it is actually the correct color scheme. Dave, I congratulate you. I think you did a hell of a
Oh, well,
job.
thanks, buddy. I just hope everybody has fun. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Now, while